Today, I'm delighted to have as my fourth guest on the second season of my podcast, Authentically Deb's, Carol Edwards. Someone whom to me is a genius in her field, OCD, and is a fellow sufferer and an author of this brilliant book, Desire-Intrusive Thoughts: What to Do When Sexual, Religious, and Harm Obsessions Carry Unwanted Arousal. It is an understatement to say that I am so excited to be interviewing her. And by the way, Carol is from the UK. Okay. Hi, Carol.
Hello.
First of all, welcome. And it's so good
Yeah.
to talk to you again. And I've been wanting to get you here for a long time.
I know.
First of all, can you hold up your book, your wonderful
Yeah.
book? Because
Um,
I got mine on Audible and I don't have it to hold up.
all right. Okay. But first, nice to chat with you as well.
Thank
Again,
you.
this is the book,
And can
and it's
you read us the full name of it?
Desire-Intrusive Thoughts: What to Do When Sexual, Religious, and Harm Obsessions Carry Unwanted Arousal.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And as I just kind of overtook everything, I was going to tell you, feel free to interrupt me and add
Yeah.
anything you want to add because you're the expert and that's why we're here. Um, when I first asked you why you wrote your book, Desire-Intrusive Thoughts, you said to me, and this is pretty much a quote, you said, to bring to light a theory that helped me grasp why I hated yet also desired harm intrusive thoughts and how to resolve the problem. For example, on the one hand, I wanted to live, and on the other hand, I felt I should die.
Yeah.
Can you kind of elaborate on that? Explain it to those of us. I mean, I suffer from OCD, and I'm sure a lot
Yeah.
of my listeners do. So,
I think really, when I was struggling with OCD, and I had the aversion to the harm obsession and other obsessions that I had as well, that all seemed normal. It was horrible, but it seemed normal. So when the desire component comes into it, it makes you feel dreadful because you're thinking, well, how can I hate these thoughts and be scared of them and do compulsions to make them go away? While on the other hand, I'm thinking, well, actually, I've got quite an urge to, want to do these harmful things. One time, whether it was doing harm to myself or doing harm to someone else, mostly though it was related to me, doing harm to myself and having that false desirous urge, say for instance, to jump out of a window, take a knife and harm myself, that kind of, yeah. And that was where I thought to myself, what the heck's going on there? Because this doesn't feel normal for OCD, because the thoughts are supposed to be ego dystonic. Now, when I looked into it, I realized even the false parts of it is also ego dystonic.
can you say that again?
Ego dystonic. So then I didn't want those thoughts. They were repulsive to me. And even the desire part, because it's false. And I realized that it was a relief, because then I realized that was also something I didn't want.
Thank you. Yeah. That was pretty deep what you said, and having been there myself, I just kind of wanted to hear it from you to
Yeah,
explain it to us.
yeah.
before we jump full tilt into the book, I wanted to talk about something you mentioned very early on in the book. I think it was like page 7 or something, how you saw yourself as a Goodwill Hunting character. And I
Yeah,
think my my listeners will, a lot of them will remember that wonderful film, Goodwill Hunting,
yeah,
um, with what, Matt Damon and Ben
yeah,
Affleck. And actually, they wrote the screenplay to that, and they won the Oscar for that. And
yeah,
but the character you're referring to, Will, I think he worked as a custodian at, was it
yeah,
Harvard? Um,
yeah.
yeah,
He was a
wonderful.
janitor, and he
Yeah,
had a brilliant mathematic mind. Um,
exactly. He
yeah,
was a genius, and yet he worked as a janitor
yeah,
at Harvard, which was interesting.
yeah, yeah.
Um, okay, so how do you see yourself as Goodwill Hunting? I see you as a genius, but I'd like you to explain it to us.
Yeah, I'd like to actually see myself as a genius, but I don't really look at myself like that. I think what it really is I suppose just like Matt, he didn't have the opportunity to study to a level that would say he's a genius, but he was a
But
genius.
he
So
was.
he knew all of this stuff without having to study it. And eventually, the professors were chasing him.
That's
I'm a
right.
little bit more modest. So I don't really look at it in a big-headed way, where the professors are going to come and chase me. But what I would like to say about being a Goodwill Hunting character is I have the knowledge in my head that makes me think, well, I understand this, and it's something that I want to look into to see if there's anything concrete about it. So, for instance, the false desire component, when people ask, why am I getting this desire when it's OCD and I'm not supposed to have all these desirous urges? And a therapist will say, well, you're just seeking reassurance, and that's a compulsion, and we can't give you that. It's just OCD, simple. And that's what therapists would say to me. It's what I've said to people also. But eventually I thought to myself, really, because I've been through this myself, there's got to be some explanation, nothing to do with reassurance, an explanation. Just like when you read the literature for OCD and you understand what it is, what it's about, it's all written down, what to do, what not to do, etc. I think an explanation to understand or add to that literature about the desire component, I think would be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where, I thought to myself, what could it be in the brain that's going on? And I had ideas about what it could be. For instance, like Matt Damon, knowing these mathematical problems and solving them, I had ideas in my head and I thought, it could be this, it could be that. And I thought, I'm going to go and figure this out. It's all in the book, the biology.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I went to look into and research, not naively. I looked into it properly, it wasn't
Objectively, yes.
yeah. I didn't just click on my screen and think, oh, read this blog and let's read this blog. That wouldn't work. I got to go into the proper stuff and the scientists and all the rest of it. And that's when I realized that the ideas in my head about what was going on in the brain, I won't mention the parts of the brain because it might get confusing. But yeah, there's parts of the brain that I thought there's something going on there. Looked into that side of it and realised that there was something about my theory that I could write about. And that's how I see myself as a good character. And so all the professionals out there, it's like, it's kind of, this is what I say, I'm stupid, but I'm not stupid.
And you're not stupid. And I know there's a couple, and there will be more chasing you soon. this book is so thorough in its coverage that there's just no way today we can cover everything
No, no,
that
no.
I want to ask you about in the book, because I didn't have it's not so much the time. I just didn't have the genius or the insight uh, that I will have. So I'm already inviting you back. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so let's see. Okay, so to me, your book is kind of dual in that it's definitely a book for lay people like me. I mean, people that have suffered from OCD but that are not professionals. And whether those people have had treatment, um, therapy or medication or not, but as well, it's a definite resource for mental health professionals. Um, and for those mental health practitioners, it very much gets into the minutia, the technical part, but you bring it back to our understanding, the
Oh, thank you.
layperson's,
Yeah,
by your experience of having had it
yeah,
yourself. And
yeah,
I think that that's real important because it's such a thorough book. Most books are made for academia or they're made for the layperson, and yours is kind of definitely both. Um, I'd like to ask you how you first learned that you had this this OCD thing.
Well, I went to a bookstore. It says it in my book actually, and happened upon a book in the bookstore about OCD. I didn't go in there looking for a book on OCD. I just saw the book kind of looking at me, and I picked it up just to have a scan through, and then I saw all of these symptoms that mirrored my own, and
Isn't that's like an
yeah,
epiphany? I mean, I love that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I
Um,
remember the title of the book, but it was a really good book. Um, and I read some of it in the shop, and then I thought I need to buy this book. So I bought it, took it home, read it in a day, and that's when I decided, right, I need to do something about myself and
wow.
all of these. Well, because I look back and I thought, well, I've had this since I was a child. Because then, I was quite a bit older. So
Yeah.
it's
You know,
strange how you can live with it and not know.
exactly. I I finally just self-diagnosed when I was in my early 50s, and like yourself, and I went back, when I read your book, I I think I was probably born with the propensity for it and suffered from it at a very early age.
Yeah, yeah,
So when the more you read about it, you think, wow, this is a thing. It's
yeah,
like because it's not normal. You
yeah,
just
yeah,
it's not. Um, so after you, so that's when once you found this book and once you relate, you said, yeah, then that's when you decided pretty much that you wanted to study it and
yeah,
become,
yeah,
I'm going to say a therapist or a writer of it,
yeah, yeah,
or definitely a coach for others.
yeah. Well, I did study to be a CBT therapist. It was an actual professional course
Okay.
studying for CBT, and then cognitive behavioral therapy, and then after that, I did the professional development for OCD. So I'm just thinking where I did the OCD with. I can't remember, but yes, I did do that.
I don't have it right here, but I remember looking at the litany of everything you've
Yeah,
done, uh,
yeah,
you know, to get to that point, and that's pretty
yeah.
amazing.
Well, I specialised in OCD. So first of all, it was a CBT, and then I specialised in the OCD, and then I did therapy with that, the CBT therapy with that with clients, and then I decided I really loved writing about OCD.
So the CBT is the cognitive based
Yeah,
therapy, right?
yeah,
Okay. So,
But I do like writing about it, but I am an advisor as well. So if anybody wanted to kind of ask me, for my advice about their own problems, then I offer an advice service.
right. And before this is over, we're going to talk about how they can reach you, because I know they're going to have questions after this. So, OCD, and you tell me if this is correct, it is on the anxiety spectrum, isn't it? Or is it?
Causes anxiety. I mean, it's under the umbrella for anxiety related problems. So yeah, and I think when you treat it, it's not like you're treating the anxiety as such, because mostly you're looking at the obsessions and the compulsions, and the reason why these people have the obsessions, because they get the intrusive thoughts, and then they kind of create the obsession from that, and that's what creates the anxiety.
Right. Well, for example, I also, during all this, had anorexia nervosa. I see that almost as a component or as a type of OCD.
Yeah. It has got some, because you're looking at a cycle. I think if you have intrusive thoughts, so you could say, right, you've got the anorexic voice going there, telling you not to eat, if you like, and then you'd be anxious if food's put in front of you, and then you look at the behaviours, similar to OCD. If you're doing,
your compulsion is to basically starve yourself, right?
Yeah, and so you're doing those avoidance behaviours. You feel better for it.
Although you're killing yourself, yes.
Yeah. Well, there's a goal, isn't there? The goal is thinness, and so you've got to get to that goal. And so the more avoidance, then the more you reach that goal. And the same with OCD. A compulsion. Say, for instance, harm obsession, like I had. If I saw knives, I would hide them out the way, and that's avoidance escape. Same. And then I feel better for a little bit until I see knives again.
So in a way, it's kind of a control. The compulsions are kind of a control of your obsessions, right? It's a way of dealing.
Yeah, the repressed attempts, to get rid of what it is that's bothering you.
But it takes so much time. Oh my God, it becomes your whole life.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it does, because it's like this, it's like when it goes like that, it's like the anxiety graph, up it goes, do a compulsion, down it goes, up anxiety again, do a compulsion, down it goes, and it just keeps going and going and going, and that's how.
And in the meantime, you're trying to live a life. It's pretty. It's pretty amazing that people, particularly people that have not received any therapy or treatment, have managed in their own way to kind of deal with it until they get help. Do you think OCD, it's kind of a loaded question, can OCD be cured, or is it kind of a lifelong condition that you, through treatment or otherwise, just learn to live with?
Well, for me and for lots of other people, we can go into remission.
Really?
Yeah. And
okay,
you can call it recovery, remission, but not a cure.
I just never thought of it like that, but it's true. Yeah.
Because it can't be a cure, because it can come back. I mean, just like cancer, it can return. People who are recovered from cancer are in remission. And it's the same with OCD, it goes into remission. And you can live a life.
And a good life, yes.
OCD. Yeah, I do now. I'm in remission. And I just live an ordinary life. I still have intrusive thoughts coming in, but I can just let them come and go.
Yeah.
and I don't pay attention to them.
Yeah, it's really weird sometimes that
Um,
you get as far along with your recovery or your remission, and then all of a sudden it comes back and you think, wow, 5 years ago this would have leveled me. This would have put me in the hospital. This would have, and now I can just say, okay,
yeah,
and just
yeah,
let it just
yeah.
go on.
And that's the best thing, because the last thing you want to do is feed an obsession with compulsions, because it'll just keep going like that. Like I said before, you need to have it like a nice plateau, you know, and
Right.
let the thoughts come and go. It's like acknowledging them. The 3 A's: acknowledge that the thoughts are there.
I'm sorry, I have a truck going by. What?
Right? So you do the 3 A's: acknowledge that the thoughts are there, accept that they are there, and allow them to come and go. So it's A. That is different to blocking them out. Because if you just ignore
Exactly.
them, they'll push back in. Because blocking them out is a compulsion.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so this I might should have asked first, but with regard to OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, um, how would you define obsessions and how would you define compulsions? And maybe just give us, the lay people, examples, because I know I've had a lot of different obsessions, whereas some people seem to just have one major.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I usually look at it this way. Usually there's a trigger, and that can be internal, just a sudden intrusive thought about anything really. It could be about harm, sexual orientation, germs, and or it could be external. Seeing something on telly about those things that I've just said, and then boom, that it was automatic, but from there, that trigger, then it depends what you do about that. So, for instance, if you start to ruminate on what that thought is and start to analyze it and bring in all kinds of inferences, that's when the obsession starts. And then when you do when you're ruminating and analyzing, that is a compulsion itself.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But yeah, and so there you've got the obsession. You've got the trigger. The obsession starts. You carry on with the compulsions to reduce the anxiety that causes, the problem, and then it just spirals out of control.
Okay.
OCD has two essential characteristics: obsessions and compulsions. But usually you get a trigger.
Yeah.
To start it off. Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to distinguish between, well, maybe it's not. I was going to say between the trigger and the obsession. I think my first obsession as a kid was insomnia.
Yeah.
And I don't know what triggered that. I don't know what made me think I could not ever sleep. But the obsession was the insomnia. What would you say
Yeah.
the trigger was?
Maybe it's just a sudden intrusive thought that's in to you. You won't be able to sleep.
Okay.
You've seen something on telly that's about someone who couldn't sleep, or read a magazine report about insomnia, and then later it's come as a thought, and then it's spiraled, when you've decided to think, oh, well, I can't sleep, instead of thinking, well, I'm just going to let this go.
Yeah.
And again, if people have real insomnia, then they probably won't go through that cycle of looking at a compulsion to correct it.
Right.
To get their anxiety
that's
down.
a whole other thing your book gets into, is the real thing, or is it OCD, which is another real thing. And I know you know all about this, but can you just give us some of the treatments for OCD?
Well, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, which I told you about before. So that helps you think differently about your beliefs, and it changes faulty beliefs, and the thoughts, feelings, and behaviours all interact. So once you understand how that's working, then it kind of is the groundwork for the exposure response prevention, and that's the main therapy. That's the evidence-based therapy for putting OCD in remission, and that's used. So instead of doing the usual response, which is doing the compulsions, you systematically resist those compulsions until eventually the habituation process, kicks in, and you start to become less sensitized to the obsession.
I'm going to ask you a really, I was going to say dumb, but I hate to say dumb. But how do you resist that? I mean,
It's hard.
yeah, I mean, to me, that's the therapy. That's it. Resisting it. And I think probably alcoholics, drug addicts, how do you resist it? How do you bite that bullet? And once you do, it does get easier. I mean, once you face it and you, yeah.
Well, you have to do it very slowly. You wouldn't, jump in the deep end straight away. For instance, if let's go back to a harm obsession, and there was a knife on the table now next to me, and I had my fear like I did before, and a therapist says, right, pick up that knife. That would be like 100% fear for me to begin with. So I wouldn't pick it up straight away. I would maybe just look at it.
Just have it there. Yes.
Just have it there and look at it, and sit with the anxiety and the discomfort until the anxiety comes down half of what it was before you started the exposure. So if the exposure was for me to look at the knife on the table, then I'd have it there. And if my anxiety was, say, 60 out of 100 on a 0 to 100 anxiety scale, then I would carry on having that knife there, sit with the anxiety, monitor it at the beginning, in the middle, at the end. But I would carry on until my anxiety had come down half of what it was before I started the exposure.
Well, so that's an example of how to resist it, because you were actively doing things during resistance. Measuring it, and that's very helpful.
And mindfulness helps as well, which is the 3 A's really, just acceptance, acknowledging the thoughts are there while you're doing this exposure, accepting they're there and allowing them to come and go, and leaning into the anxiety until it starts to reduce. And then, you kind of disassociate the compulsion with the anxiety relief then, because that's what you need. You need to break that.
You need to break that habit or that pattern.
Because anxiety is going to come down anyway. It comes down by itself, whether compulsion or not.
And, you kind of have to get to this point where it's really okay to be anxious. I mean, that's life. It doesn't all have to be perfect and smooth, because it's not going to be.
No.
Let me see what I have here. I have here asking you to explain how intrusive thoughts, which initially feel like you have no control over them, such as sexual harm or religious. Well, I think we've already answered that question. I was going to ask you how that is part of OCD, but we just did that. So,
it's like the intrusive thoughts are automatic.
Yeah, exactly.
Thinking is a different thing.
Yeah.
thinking it's the compulsion.
Now, I had scrupulosity, and I also had a bit of, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, trichotillomania.
Oh yeah,
And scrupulosity really almost took me down
yeah,
in my pre-treatment days. And you mentioned religious thoughts.
yeah,
Um, that was very, very difficult. And you think ERP is what is best for that?
yeah. But for scrupulosity, yeah, yeah. I used to have that. I used to have a lot of moral obsessions. Doing the right thing all the time, and then with and the religious side of it. Um, I remember becoming a Christian when I was about 10,
Me
and
too. Me too.
yeah, after that, and I developed an obsession thinking I wasn't properly saved, so I
Me
didn't know.
too. Yeah. I could
Yeah,
not get saved.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I brought the preacher in, I brought everyone in, and he said, "Well, you're saved." And I thought, "No, I'm not. I'm going to hell." And it
yeah.
was, it
Although it's
was,
not funny really, but yeah,
it was horrible. I mean,
it is.
at one point, I was in the car with my then husband, and I said, "I'm not saved," and he said, "Oh my goodness, yes, you are." And it, this is a horrible compulsion, but the only thing I knew to do was to open that car door and jump out. And he literally pulled me back in.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that was the emotional pain I was feeling from
mm,
it.
yeah. I
And
think you can get so absorbed in the obsession that
yeah,
the compulsions can become hazardous. And I
yeah,
write that in my book
yes, yeah,
because
you
I've been there
do.
myself, so I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really, really
It's
rough.
just, yeah, you
Um,
just need to rein yourself right back to the compulsions. But if you didn't know that you had scrupulosity and what was happening to you,
it felt real, felt
yeah,
very real.
it can feel real. But
Yeah.
feelings are OCD as well.
And that trichotillomania, I don't know that I ever pulled huge blotches out of my uh, scalp, but I did have this thing with twisting my hair,
Yeah,
and I will still get into that sometimes, and I'll just say, "Whoa, okay, move on,"
yeah,
um, until it does come out, and
yeah,
and that's a compulsion.
yeah. I
And
mean,
different things trigger it for me, but
yeah.
um,
So sometimes I look at that as a stress thing because I can kind of identify because I have an habit of doing this over and over again, right from being a child. Um, and you do get these body focused repetitive behaviors, and you could actually look at that as a consequence of stress and anxiety, and it's compulsive. But when you look at the word compulsive, you've got to think of, well, in what context is that?
yeah. And
Yeah,
I think I've mentioned this to you before, but about probably about 15 years ago, there was a woman in the state of Texas that killed her 5 children. And she was obviously psychotic, among other things,
yeah,
thinking they were devils because she was a devil. And I suppose her compulsion was just to kill them. Um, but I also noticed about her that she did have trichotillomania. She did have
yeah,
large swatches of baldness. And
yeah,
so maybe she had used that as a compulsion initially, and it just got worse because it was never
yeah.
treated.
I think the hair pulling will be a consequence of stress, as I said before. If you've got psychosis, then you're looking at delusions, and the OCD is different because even when someone, you know, has a lack of insight, if you like, then it's it can seem like delusional, but
It
it's
can. In fact, I was going to say,
different.
you don't think it's a delusion? Because we know it's not real, but yet we feel like it is.
Yeah, it's a lack of insight in OCD when you get so far into what looks like a delusion. It's just a delusion in psychosis is a completely different thing.
Okay.
It's a fixed belief, you see. That they actually believe in it, and you can't sway them one way or another. With someone with OCD, if they've got good insight, then they can see that what's happening isn't really about them, but they've got the uncertainty, and they go along with that, and that's why they do the compulsions, because they can't tolerate the discomfort of what ifs.
Yeah.
That with psychosis, it's a fixed belief. It's that that is it. There's no change in their way of thinking on that.
Okay.
And
Well, for example, with I'm just throwing these things out. For example, with Howard Hughes and his obsession with cleanliness, um, would you say he was psychotic or did he have OCD?
from my point of view, I would just say that it was deeply absorbed in the obsession, which in my book we would look at it as dissociation peculiar to OCD. And that doesn't come from me. This is some of my research. And the professors who look into that are noted in my book.
Mm-hmm.
Dissociation peculiar to OCD. So this doesn't mean pathological dissociation, like being, derealization, where things don't feel quite real. You feel like you're in a bubble. Or depersonalization, where you just don't feel quite connected with yourself. This is to do with OCD only. And so you get so absorbed into the obsession that, before you're so absorbed, you're doing your rituals and rituals and rituals over and over again. And then you get so absorbed that you become dissociated. And that's where I think that compulsions can become hazardous.
That compulsions can what?
Become hazardous.
Yes.
Because you can start to think, well, for instance, if you believe in God, you might think, at first you've got this, say for me, I've got this obsession where a suicide intrusive thought, develops into an obsession, and I think, all right, I need to jump out the window, I feel like I've got this urge that I should jump out the window and kill myself. So, before it gets to the stage where it's becoming hazardous, because somehow you stop yourself and you think, oh no, something comes to your head and you think, no, the time's not right. God's sending me a signal, the time's not right. For instance, say the window won't open, or some thought comes to your head and saying, stop, because you've got to look at so many things around it. It's like this kinesthesia as well, which stops you in your tracks. It's like another, not a sixth sense, but it's I'm trying to think of the word. Like eyes, ears.
I know I can't think of it either.
What's the word? It's not sense. It's a. But anyway, it's another one of those senses. Like eyes, ears, nose, smelling, whatever, and it stops you from moving. So, for instance, these people who think that they're going to harm someone with a knife, and they're going to pick it up and lunge at someone, that, whatever it is, sense, let's just call it sense, that sense just stops you in your tracks. You can't move because it isn't real. It's an obsession. There's nothing real about an obsession. So kinesthesia will stop that. The only concern I have is when people get so dissociated, and I'm talking about, peculiar to OCD now, that rituals, as I've said, can become hazardous, and you can actually go a little bit too far, if you like, with compulsion. So someone might just go a little bit too far, like test the obsession out. Is this the right time? Is it the right time? Because of these suicide intrusive thoughts, and they might cause themselves some harm,
Mm-hmm.
but not on purpose. It's because they're so dissociated.
Um,
So important to get them back, reined back into the ERP process.
I'm not going to get into it now. I will next time we meet because I need to.
Yeah, yeah.
I need to refresh myself with your book again because it's like I say, to me, your book is for lay people, and it's also for very, very well trained professionals. But uh, you you mention um, examples of people. Well, I'm just going to have to stop it at that point because now I'm kind of getting into a maze with it. But
Yeah,
one thing I wanted
that's
to,
all right.
I will get back to that. One thing I wanted to ask you or mention to you is that OCD and bipolar and schizophrenia are the three major mental illnesses. And yet, OCD does not get the attention or the press, um, or probably even the research that the other two do.
Well, I think it's because a lot of people see it as a quirk. It's
They
like
do. They do.
they don't see the ins and outs. The stuff I was just talking about there was so deep. Nobody would see that. Nobody would see that someone's struggling with, for instance, suicide intrusive thoughts, paedophile intrusive thoughts. Oh my God, what if I, molest a child, etc. And this is a thing, when you get so dissociated, and you might think, I'm just going to go and have a look at child porn just to check, and that's testing the obsession out. Now, you go to a court of law, the judge is not going to accept it. It's like you looked at child porn. That is it, and they won't understand. Well, hang on, he's just gone a little bit too far with the compulsion. He's testing out the obsession. It's not really about him, or her. And this is what people don't understand. They just see it as a quirk. It's like, oh, she washes her hands too much. Oh, she's an obsessive cleaner, that kind of thing. No, it's not just about that.
Well, is it in the literature that you can have an OCD personality as opposed to OCD? Because I think a lot of people said, "Oh, I have OCD," and what they have
Yeah,
is an OCD personality. They don't.
it's just preference, I think, in that way. It's like I always come back to the OCD cycle. If someone's cleaning and they're happy about cleaning and it looks obsessive, and then but then and they're happy, they're not getting any anxiety about it, then that's just a preference, and like you say, and the personality for it. But I won't class it as OCD. But if someone's cleaning all the time and they're getting anxious because they're seeing a little bit of dirt and it's causing them anxiety, they're thinking, oh, what could be in that little bit of dirt? There could be some germs in it that'll cause the family to get ill, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Just tidying anyway. It's like, some people like to have everything so nice. Well, I say like, that's wrong. That's the people who actually prefer to be tidy and clean and etc. But imagine,
And then there's the control freaks.
yeah.
I,
But imagine, having OCD with it, and say, for instance, your curtains are just not quite right. You think, I need to get up and go and put the curtains dead straight, because if I don't, I can't cope with this discomfort. And then if you get the magical thinking with it, and it's like, if you don't get, OCD saying, if you don't get up and go and straighten those curtains, something terrible is going to happen. And so they'll get up and go and do it. Now that's the difference, to someone who has a preference for keeping everything neat and tidy and doesn't get anxiety with it.
let me ask you one other question. Do you consider OCD one of the major three mental illnesses? Do you consider it on that level?
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
too.
It's debilitating for people.
Yeah. I think I know what I was trying to get at before. You use, maybe not a lot, but you use some examples in your book of comparing what is a real, like pedophilia.
Yeah.
How would you treat a pedophile as opposed to someone that thinks they are a pedophile, but they have OCD? Um, and I'm not going to get into it, but there was something in your own life, not about that, um, that you had to struggle with, and kind of thought, well, is this me or is this just OCD? And I think it turned out to be OCD.
Yeah.
But
That was a
that,
transgender, was it?
yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Yeah.
That was a real tricky one.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
triggers for that must have just been, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a real struggle because you really do wonder, well, am I or transgender or am I not transgender? And you kind of test it out, but at the time when I was testing it out, I was actually doing a compulsion, but I didn't realize then.
By testing it out?
Yeah, testing it out, dressing as a man. Do I feel comfortable? Don't I feel comfortable? I didn't. I hated it. I was just like, I don't get it though, because I don't really like this. I'm okay. And then you just get all these intrusive thoughts coming and saying, yeah, but this, but that, but this, but that. And you're thinking, oh, wish it had all just shut up in my head. But the more you feed it and test it out, then the worse it gets and the more you believe in it.
Yeah. So
did
you really have to go back and see what that original trigger was? Like you mentioned that your father wanted a son and all that.
Yeah.
Is that what helped you to differentiate?
Yeah. I mean, I think so, because some professionals might say, look, there doesn't have to be anything in the past that would make you have this obsession. And others might think, yes, there is something, that could have triggered it years ago. And I think for me, it was, looking back and thinking I wasn't the boy that I was supposed to be.
It made sense to me. But I'm a lay person, but it surely made sense to me.
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, my parents wanted a boy, and they got a girl, so it could be a trigger that's carried through to adulthood, and then something sparked it off.
Yeah. And if you hadn't have been a genius, or if you hadn't have taken it upon yourself to really try to figure it out, I can see how people would have gone completely off the rails with that.
Yeah.
And
well, I did for a little bit until I realized, but yeah, it's awful but it's like those questions, to determine, what's going on, and, realizing, that there is a difference between, obviously, between being transgender and having a fear of transgender. And as I've said before, and I'm going to say it again, comes back to the OCD cycle.
Mm-hmm.
You get the fearful thoughts, you get compulsions, anxiety relief, and back again.
Right. I just know our listeners are I know they have all sorts of questions now, because I do now. I can remember, molestation, particularly of women. And did your parents molest you, or did a relative or whatever? My parents were divorced, and when I visited my dad when I was a kid, we used to sleep in the same bed, which I'm not sure was appropriate, but nothing ever happened. But then I would read about things where people just blocked it out, and it didn't become apparent to them that this really happened. And so I wouldn't say hours, but I think over the course of time, I have spent hours thinking, because he would sleep in his boxer underwear and I would sleep in my little jammies, and I was thinking, oh my God, did something happen? Am I blocking this out? And I would just kind of rack my brain on that. And I just finally said, no, nothing happened.
Objectively, we know. I think, I've lost my train of thought now. Yeah, the hard part is when there's a real event there that you can kind of go back to, and you think, okay, so what really did happen in that real event?
So in a way, it was possibly, if not probably, inappropriate for him to have slept in the same bed with him.
Yeah.
But I never considered anything of it until I kept reading about this and all that. So anyway,
Because you're sure before the obsession, you see. You know before the obsession that nothing happened. It's only once you've got that obsession that you start looking at all the doubts and uncertainties.
Exactly. That's kind of a good example of that. Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything at our first visit that you would like to add about the book, or maybe what you're working on now? I know. I mean, I'd love for you to share how the readers can. I keep saying readers. How the listeners can get to you. So, anything you'd like to add?
Well, at the moment, I'm writing another book, and this time I'm going to include an inference-based approach. And if I'd have known about the inference-based approach before I wrote this book, I would have been really happy because I love it. It's let me just check where this book is. This is a brilliant book. It's Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. It's Clinician's Handbook for OCD, and it's Kieran O'Connor and Frederick Ardema. It's brilliant. And so everything from there that I've read shows that there's another component that comes into OCD.
And what is it again?
It's an inference-based approach.
Inference.
Yeah. So all these inferences come in. So, for instance, the what you were just talking about sleeping in bed with your father. You're looking at inferences there because you're thinking, well, it wasn't really appropriate to sleep, for my father to have me sleep in the bed. And so, things evolve from that in your head. And then you start looking at other inferences. I've broken it up with an acronym GAF. So you've got GAF, general. This is where my memory fails me. General something. GAF.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Never mind. I've forgotten it. It'll come back to me. It's my memory.
It will. Yes.
Yeah. General. Abstract facts. Personal experience. And it's another P now. Possibilities and hearsay. Yeah.
And all of that adds up to inferences or inferring.
All those are yeah. So you might say something. For instance, you might have heard someone say, "Oh, it's a bit strange for someone to have a child sleep in the bed with them," and then someone else might say, "Well, I heard, this is hearsay, that fathers who sleep with a child in their bed means such and such." Do you see what I mean? And then all these inferences come in, and then it adds credibility to the obsession.
So does this evolve into another treatment for OCD?
Yeah. There's an inference-based approach. There's another book. It's not just this book. There's another book, an inference-based approach to OCD, and it looks like a really good therapy.
And that's what your next book is.
Yeah, especially for people who don't take well to ERP.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever took really well to that because I went so many years without being diagnosed that I kind of did it to myself. I mean, I kind of exposed myself. So that was not. So this is very interesting to me. What your next project is?
Yeah, it is really good. And I've talked to Frederick Ardema, to get his permission to include some of his material into my book. So I'm happy about that.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and so people can find me on my website at ocdtopics.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I will also put this in print below our podcast, so that they can definitely get that. And that's where they will also find what you called your blogs and your discussions, or okay.
I've got blogs on there for everybody to read, and then I have some
She does.
PDF,
Oh my goodness.
PDF
Yes.
downloads in my OCD store. I've got about 6 in there, but I'm going to build that up. So I've got PDF downloads for depression, misophonia. I talk about dyslexia.
What is that?
Hatred of sounds.
What?
Hatred of sounds.
Hatred of sounds.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that falls into the category, so it seems, with OCD. So people don't like to hear people chew and swallow and sniff and other things as well.
Yes.
It's quite interesting.
I have a child like that, there's certain things that I do that she just cannot. It's like, I guess to her, it's like scraping on a blackboard or something.
Yeah. It's like,
So, God.
Yes.
Okay.
And other things as well on there.
Well, again, when they go to this ocdtopics.com, they're going to be able to find out how to reach you, what you can do for them.
Yeah.
And you do coach people, or can I say counsel people?
Yeah. Well, I call it an advice service because
an advice service.
Someone talk to me on Skype and we just have a chat about their problems, and I can help them there know what to do, etc., or to help themselves and give them information that way.
Okay. And I'm just going to touch on this, but I know I've mentioned to you the new social media Clubhouse. There are rooms about OCD, and a lot of the folks in those rooms are wonderful lay people me.
Yeah. And I remember you saying
they are missing a professional like yourself. They're missing, and we all try to help each other, but sometimes we just don't know the answers. So anyway, I'd still like you to look into that.
I'll think about that. Yeah.
Because
I did look into it, and then it slipped my mind. Come back to it.
Well, you're needed. But we can get a lot just from what we've talked about today, from your book, from your website, and from your new book, which I'm very interested in. So I always learn something from talking to you.
Thank you.
Then I always get questions. So I just want to thank you again for coming.
Thank you for having me.
It's been something I wanted to do for some time.
Yeah, I know.
And, I wish I'd known about a lot of what you write about a lot earlier, but better late than never, right?
Yeah. Well, thanks for that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, listen, thank you until we meet again, which we will.
All right. Yeah.
Okay. And I know you're vaccinated, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Me too.
Yeah.
So just take care, and we will chat soon.
Yeah. Okay then.
Bye.
Nice to see you. Bye.
To reiterate, Carol's wonderfully informative book, Desire-Intrusive Thoughts, can be purchased on Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, and on her website, www.ocdtopics.com. And you can reach me, Deborah, at my email, authenticallydebs@gmail.com, and on my website, www.deborahjangray.com. Hey, get vaccinated if you haven't, and blessings, everyone. See you soon.